Let me bring in Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk Live co-host. Do you understand this? Mac Jones, a trading card that's worth over $100,000?
Well, I guess it's valued at that amount based upon the assumption he's going to turn into a great quarterback. If he ends up not being as good as people think he'll be, then that price is going to plummet, I would say.
Do you collect cards?
I used to. I still have all of my cards back from the 70s. The Topps football cards, I have boxes of them. The year I really got into it was 1976. And that was the year that the Walter Payton rookie card came out. Now, that year, there are, in my files, for some of the lesser players, 8, 9, or 10 of them. I ended up that year with one Walter Payton rookie card. It is kept in a special plexiglass case too.
Paulie will buy it.
At some point, I'll give it to my son, and he'll lose it.
All right, help me understand what the Rams did and are doing. Aaron Donald's contract, Cooper Kupp's contract, Jalen Ramsey got paid. Everybody's gotten paid. Matthew Stafford's gotten paid. Why aren't other teams following the same blueprint that the Rams are putting down?
We joked on Monday that Les Snead's F them picks T-shirt says on the back, F that cap, because that's what they're doing now. They're paying their best players. And you can do it if you're willing to do this, Dan. The great Patriots teams had starters and stars who took less so that they could have backups that they would pay more to, that they had a healthy middle class of backup talent. So when someone got injured, you plug in a guy who maybe would be a starter somewhere else and you don't miss a beat. The Rams consciously take the risk that if one of their starters is injured, whether it's a star or just a run-of-the-mill starting player, they're going to have young guys. They're going to have guys on rookie deals, guys making minimum salary that have to step in and step up. That's the risk they're taking. And so far it hasn't burned them. But when you get yourself top-heavy with so many star players taking up so much of the cap, you have to rely upon young, inexperienced players who are cheap and who can come in and get it done. You got to coach them up. You got to get them ready. And that's where the Rams, I think, are making their move, having great young players that weren't supposedly great, who can come in and play when they need them. And they've managed to keep their guys healthy, so they haven't had to rely on a lot of these young players to perform.
How sustainable is this?
Until guys start getting injured and guys miss games and key players aren't available, or you get to a point where you're paying Aaron Donald $65 million over the next 2 years. Let's say he starts to show wear and tear this year or next year, and you're stuck. He's getting $65 million fully guaranteed. So that's where it falls apart. If your star players, the guys you're playing the most money to, aren't getting it done. And one thing to watch if you're a Rams fan, Dan, that elbow issue with Matthew Stafford, he hasn't thrown this offseason. He had an anti-inflammatory shot in his elbow. His elbow is a fairly important piece of the apparatus that allows him to throw the football. They're hopeful he can throw by training camp, but even if he can, does it hold up through the grind of training camp and preseason? Not that he'll play much, 17-game regular season, playoffs, and what's going on in that elbow? And John Wolford is the backup because you can't afford to have a $10 million a year backup when you're relying upon this top-heavy roster of superstars. So if Stafford, for some reason, can't go this year at some point, and they got to rely on Wolford, that's maybe when it all starts to fall apart.
Anything changed with Deshaun Watson situation based off the New York Times extensive article by Jenny Vrentas?
Well, I think, the one big change is it just feels like the court of public opinion is lost for Deshaun Watson and never will be retrieved. But yesterday's big development, one day after Jenny Vrentas' story mentioned what the Texans did, what the Texans knew, what maybe they should have known, here comes Tony Buzbee, who represents the 24 women who have sued Watson, with a statement saying, I'm bringing the Texans to the party now, too. Now, if that statement is made before the New York Times article, it has a different feel. On the heels of the New York Times article, when Jenny introduces the idea of the Texans' potential responsibility, it doesn't feel like ambulance chasing when Tony Buzbee issues a statement. It feels valid because it's been given credibility by the New York Times. It was brilliant by Buzbee to issue the statement when he did. And now, Dan, as these cases go forward, the frontline defense by the Texans, I think, will be, we're not responsible for Deshaun Watson's criminal conduct. So it puts the Texans in a position where they may be joining Busby in piling on Watson, saying, we're not responsible for his crimes. Those are his crimes. We've got no duty to the victims of his crimes. That's on him. That's a way it could go here. And that may make things even worse for Deshaun Watson.
I'll leave you with this. Will there be fallout with the Commanders' defensive coordinator, Jack Del Rio's comments?
Well, look, Dan, I wrote about this earlier today. The question now becomes, when training camp convenes, will Del Rio still be the defensive coordinator? He's not Bill Belichick, all due respect, as a defensive coordinator. Ron Rivera is a defensive head coach. The Commanders have to ask themselves, is it worth it to us to continue with a guy who has created this issue, stepped on this rig, called the insurrection from January 6th a dust-up, and presumably apologized at the direct behest of team management? I think it remains to be seen. And I know that people out there will cry cancel culture. That's the buzzword of those who want to have no responsibility at all for anything they say or do. It's fair to wonder whether it's in the best interest of the Commanders. Players get fired all the time because it's in the best interest of the team. Is it in the best interest of the Commanders to go forward with a guy who created such a pointless and avoidable distraction?
But didn't you have a politician who said this is the final nail in the coffin, according to the article you had?
Yeah, as it relates to getting free money from Virginia for a new stadium.
Yeah.
So to the extent that that gets them back in line for taxpayer money, and I don't think any of these owners should be getting taxpayer money. They can afford their own damn stadiums. But if they think it gets them back in line for some free money for a new stadium, I don't think they hesitate to move on from Jack Del Rio. So I think once the offseason program ends, they got a decision to make about whether or not to keep Del Rio around. And it won't surprise me if they change him. And, I was very vocal in defending Jack Del Rio. When the Raiders secretly lined up John Gruden to replace him while he was still on the job, I think that was wrong by the Raiders and by Gruden to do that. But this time around, it's his own fault if he ends up out of a job.
Good stuff, buddy. Thanks.
All right, keep up.
It's Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk Live co-host. We'll take a break. Phone calls coming up. Jim Jackson will get his thoughts on what happened last night with the Celtics and the Warriors.